This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the final episode in Season 1 of Disney Plus's Willow. The episode is titled Children of the Wyrm. I've got two individuals with me who are not Children of the Wyrm. They are the faces of the Willow conversation that we had last week. I am, of course, talking about first Neil Baker. Neil, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me back.
You bet. And also joining us from last week is Ross Hollebon. Ross, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Great to see you again, Neil. So quickly, and looking forward to seeing what episode 7 to episode 8 means for the three of us together.
I am too. Ross texted me after I watched and I said, hold that thought, my friend. Let's just have a reunion next week and let's talk about it. I don't normally have the exact same guests on the next week, but I mean, I really liked our discussion last week. We got a lot of wonderful feedback about it. I think it's important, as we keep saying, to be honest, but also to watch with an open mind and open heart and just kind of see where things take us. So, Neil, let's start with you, bud. Give me one word to describe the episode and your overall thoughts on Children of the Wyrm.
Yes, so I've unwrapped is the word that I'm going to give you, which has multiple meanings, I guess. But it's I'm thinking of it in the way in the fact that it's not the story isn't wrapped, and so it's kind of left in that strange limbo of will there be a season 2, which obviously has been hinted at. But also it still felt a little bit unfinished. So that's my word to describe it.
Unwrapped. Ross, what about you?
Yeah, we are on the same wavelength there, Neil, because I have complete, making sure that there is a question mark after complete.
Yeah, good.
So kind of the same thing. Like we have, a very cool looking teaser of, hey, this could continue. We have Alora Dannon at the end looking back at the doors. Some different things are happening to say, okay, there's a chance for this to move forward. So good or bad, that is the case. And I think it's super fun to always leave on that sort of cliffhanger at the end.
Okay. My word to describe this episode is relieved. I'm actually relieved that I felt the way I did throughout most of the episode because I didn't feel like I did after I watched episode 7. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, we'll let this conversation sort of tell us. But I will say, overall, this ending was better than I feared it might be. I wasn't afraid it was going to be good. I was afraid it wasn't going to be good. We'll get to that with the letter grid. So both of you alluded to the fact, you talked about the ending as far as how it wrapped or unwrapped things, didn't wrap things up at all. My biggest quibble was stories, and this is why I don't love the Hunger Games. My problem with the Hunger Games is not Katniss Everdeen. I think Katniss Everdeen is a fantastic protagonist. I really like her, and I like her journey. But my problem with those books is I feel like of the 3 books, none of them really have a full beginning, middle, and end. That's always bothered me as a teacher of literature. Because what people always say, and I know I've said this on the show before, people always say, what about Tolkien and Lord of the Rings? That's actually not a good example for your argument if you are contrary to what I'm saying, because he wrote the entire book and the editors forced him to break it up into 3. That's why we have Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, Return of the King. That's why we have that, because the editors had him do that, right? All the Harry Potter books, all 7 of them have a beginning and a middle and end. They transition to the next thing beautifully. Master storytelling, master class in storytelling, but they all are complete in and of themselves. Gentlemen, is this finale complete in and of itself?
Ross, you can go first with this one. because I'm still formulating.
I think it's complete in the sense that the goal was to go save Eric after he was captured. So they did that. Where it's still open is that we have seen the prophecies or visions or whatever with Alora Dannon dead, with, you know, different people in different places that we haven't reached yet. So I feel like for this season and how they set it up with Eric at the beginning being taken, their goal was to go rescue him. So they closed the story in that regard, leaving it open to a larger scale story from there.
You're being so good and so positive, Ross. I sense there's something brewing that I'm looking forward to hearing what's going to happen. But I appreciate it.
You know what? It's funny. Like, even I don't know. I'm very relative to you in that we like to enjoy things. Like I want to enjoy everything that I like, everything that I watch.
Yes.
And that isn't always the case, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
What I tried to remind myself through this process is there are a lot of people I saw that I respect their opinions and their fandoms and things like that, tweeting or posting on Instagram, saying how much they loved it and how carefree it was and this and that. And it really took me watching The Witcher Blood Origin to kind of clear myself of everything from this. So again, I'm going to try and find the bright points. I will bring up the other ones as well, but that's kind of where I am.
Hey, Ross has got a Ross, and I appreciate that about you, for sure. All right, Neil.
Yeah, so I agree with what Ross said, that they did wrap up that that arc that with Eric and getting him back. It felt like the whole Wyrm business came in the last two episodes. It wasn't an undercurrent throughout the show. And it I don't know, it just came out of nowhere, and that's where I got this feeling of it's just, it's finished but it's not finished, and okay, they're setting it up for a sequel or another series, obviously, which I'm perfectly fine with. But there's just these last two episodes were just suddenly a lot of exposition and a lot of new stuff that appeared. I don't know, it just felt like it was a story that's kind of rambled and been enjoyable and frustrating in equal measures. And then suddenly we got these two episodes with all this cataclysmic stuff, and we've got to still resolve that. So I don't know, it's something about it. Again, I think it's to do with timing, or it just doesn't sit right with me. It's one of those kind of strange feelings.
Right. Noted. I appreciate that. Well, I was pretty clear that I was frustrated with the whole Wyrm concept from the 7th episode because it was so loose. It wasn't even erratic or tangential. It was like out of nowhere. It was related to of nothing. But in this episode, to my restful soul, it worked. They tied it all together. Now, look, let's be clear. I would have liked to have seen snippets of this throughout the entire, even something very, very small or something that shows up a little bit in 3 or 4, and then you build to it. Like, again, like so many other stories that we quoted last episode, so I won't retread that landscape again on this episode. But for what I was given, it fairly delivered. The epilogue, the two epilogues, we'll talk about that because I do have some challenges with the narrative there. But overall, it actually did what it set out to do, and I was very happy about that. And I would have been not surprised, but disappointed if it didn't, because for the highs and lows that this season has brought me, at the end of the day, I very much believe in the storytellers. I very much believe in Lucasfilm, and I just hope that they would steer it in a direction. It didn't have to be predictable. I'm glad it wasn't, but it had to deliver with, who fired the smoking gun, the Chekhov smoking gun. We had to see that. So we talked a little bit about that, but what are some points that you want to bring up from the episode itself? I certainly got a list of some things, but Neil, what are some things that you would like to air?
I did like what happened with Borman, with regard to him understanding that it wasn't his story. I know that was kind of touched on in the previous episode, but then it was really kind of hammered home in this one, the fact that he was going to sacrifice himself to the Gals essentially, and of course he didn't, and that's actually a sticking point that I have with characters surviving everything. But I liked that. I thought that was nicely done. I made a conscious decision. I felt that I was getting a bit snarky, and I don't like snarkiness in critiques. And so I'm pulling back on it. So it's like when Kit puts the armor on, and and it all transforms, and and the first thing that pops into your head is like, Iron Man or that kind of idea. And then I thought, well, let's just pull this back. I mean, how else are you going to depict this? And so in a way, it was a good learning experience for me to try and be a bit more positive while watching stuff and letting things go a little bit. But other than that, Jade, I feel, was horribly underused, and that's one of my biggest disappointments, I think, for the show. It felt strange that I don't know, she should have worn the armor basically, or I know, I guess it was Kit's legacy to wear this thing, but Jade was building up as this protector and knight, and again, you can take her out of the story, and it doesn't make a huge difference to the story other than the relationship, So that was my main takeaway from this. Was I'd love to have seen some more stuff done with Erin's character.
So once she meets her sister, you're right. I didn't really quite put my finger on that. Kept waiting for more, I guess. But
that was the end of the story.
Once she met her sister, like that was it. Then she became just like sort of a prize or a trophy for Kit. And I think that's a major. I don't think that was the explicit intent, but that's very much what we got. And that is unfortunate because Erin Kellerman is amazing. And I think her character is really fascinating too. And is there more? I will say real quickly about that armor. When I saw it happening, there was a part of me that thought, would I have ever not liked this? Because this is freaking awesome. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it nailed it, and the effects were wonderful. Of course, it had that very much a nod and a wink and a smile to Iron Man. And I think that's part of why it worked, because it's just very majestic, and it gave Kit a little bit of gravitas to help her sort of believe in her and her story and her importance, because she did struggle with why her father left her and picked a stranger over her. So that was a grand slam for me. I was so excited about that. I thought that was cool. Ross, do you want to comment on that, or you have another thing you'd like to bring up?
I will say, I have a note here that all it says is the armor equals awesome. So I enjoyed it. It's almost like the series taught me to question things as I went along. Good. That I might not normally question, because there were so many times where I was just like, but this was one of those. And I think, Dan, relative to probably how both of you looked at it, it was just like, this was super cool. I don't care if it, was a little bit of Iron Man, or I don't know if you guys watched Troll Hunters, Guillermo del Toro's cartoon, which is fantastic. And every time that he gets the armor on, it's super cool as well. So it's just one of those things where just like, oh, cool stuff's about to happen right now. So I love that part of it. Like I said, like I put a little research into this and looked into, okay, why don't I like this and other people do? And I found an article from The Hollywood Reporter by Ryan Gajowski, and Bob Dolman, who's one of the original film writers, was also involved in the writer's room for this series. So I just have a quick quote that I'm going to read from that.
Please, yeah.
It felt that the studio was over our shoulder quite a bit, the studio being Disney and Lucasfilm. They had good input. They had good notes. You have to move a series along and you have to be involved in it. But I felt like we weren't left alone enough just to toss ideas around and have the kind of freedom that I had when I was working with George and Ron. and not be worried about whether or not an idea was good or bad, but just trying things out and taking a chance and having the courage to even find a bad idea, knowing that it could lead to a good idea. I thought that quote there helped sum up a lot of my feelings for, I think, what I saw in this that I didn't like. And it's whenever I watch a film that has incredible parts and it's just like, yep, too many chefs got in this kitchen. And it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, the second one, where it's just like, oh, we made a lot of money last time, so now we can do all this special effects stuff and we're not going to have as good a story. Mm-hmm. So for me, and I know for you, Dan, Neil, I'm assuming for you, it always starts with the story for me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that reminds me of Batman. I mean, this is maybe it's this like comparison, but I don't think it's Batman Returns. Didn't they have 3 scripts going on at the exact same time when they were filming that Michael Keaton sequel?
Yeah, I think so.
And it showed it's got to start with the story. It's got to start with, you know, these characters and evolving them. And you mentioned Boorman, Neil, and I liked Boorman a lot. He was one of my favorite characters until he became sort of a one-trick pony. Again, the episode where we meet his roots, and then he becomes reduced to this punchline where he's asking people to make out. And he becomes like this, what's the word I'm looking for? Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain at all costs. What is that word? Oh, gosh. I can't remember. Well, it'll come to me.
Tom Gross?
Yeah.
No kidding. Really. I just had to throw something in there because it was too quiet. Tom, we love you.
Absolutely. No, he became like a one-dimensional, like, horn dog. I mean, that's not exactly eloquent. And that was disappointing. I mean, when he turns to stone, which is a wonderful visual, it was sort of symbolic for me because his character stopped evolving once he met that woman that he clearly was in love with. So hedonist. He turns into a hedonist. That's the word that sounds better than horn dog. So that was disappointing. I'm not gonna say it bothered me because, well, you know, but
it wasn't consistent.
No, it wasn't. And the growth, I mean, you can look, brevity, or not brevity, but levity is great. It's funny. His comedic timing and is very useful because there's some heavy things that happen. Him giving up the armor, realizing it wasn't his story, all great things. But I don't know. I didn't, at that point, we'd worked so hard to get to this finale, and I wanted it to be taken seriously. So for me, the humor wasn't as funny because there wasn't a lot of funny stuff going on.
Yeah, it was out of place for sure. And actually, and talking about Boorman as well, I mean, I can understand why the filmmakers did it, but having him just go into the room with the Gales and then emerge, and we had no idea what happened in there. Now, you know, I don't have a huge issue with that, but it was just something about the timing of it, or he just suddenly emerges and we don't know if they escaped or or he slaughtered them all, and we didn't get to see anything. It could have been a budgetary thing. But did I say budgetary thing? Because
we didn't get to see them; those main big bads, they really didn't fight at all. Like Suetama was hardly even used.
He did a lot of running.
Yeah.
The Doom used his whip against Willow a little bit in there, but I think this is one of the things, and this is my main note, is the monsters and the makeup are my favorite parts of the entire show.
Good.
Yeah, for sure.
It was the Scourge, who's Eunice, the Doom, the guy with all the teeth, like, who I thought was just like, what a spectacular villain, scary, nightmarish type character. The Lich, and then even the Crone towards the end, especially once we were getting the withered older version of her. I thought all that stuff was fascinating, and in the best way possible, I hope it provides creative building night terrors to little kids who turn it into great writing at some point, because it's just like, ooh, this scared me. Like, I read Edgar Allan Poe way too young as a kid, and loved it. And I had nightmares because of it. But I think I'm a better writer now because of it.
Absolutely. But where Neil, were you going to say something earlier? I feel like I cut you off.
No. I mean, I was pretty much there. I mean, I was kind of working my way through the characters and what I thought about them. And one again, I think I mentioned that Willow seemed to be the least interesting character in the whole Willow show. The decision for him to, I'm going to go back to Mims, and we knew he wasn't. That was a little bit flaky for me. I would have liked something else that stopped him from joining them at the end, because I still didn't feel like he was the hero that we'd come to know. I understand, family is super important, and that's one of the themes that was running through the whole series.
Yes.
But for him to have reached that point and then say, no, I'm going back home, didn't work for me. And then, he just bursts in at the end. Oh, and sorry. And this leads me on to the whole business with wands and things, which they stopped using, but there seemed to be a lot of importance placed on his staff and the wand itself. And yet at the end, all the battles are fought without them.
A lot of,
which,
like
I understand there's symbolism of of shedding things that you have to hang on to,
sure,
and to be true to yourself, and I kind of get that, but I don't know, it just felt like all the way through the show there was a lot of obsession with the wand and the use of the staff, and the fact that he didn't really have the power, and all of a sudden him and Allura are just these hugely powerful
video games.
Yeah, they leveled up. Like I said last time, they leveled up big time. But I enjoyed it for what it was, though. It just didn't feel quite right to me. I'd have liked something else to hold Willow back. I'd like to have been thinking about him in that last episode more.
Okay.
He kind of disappeared at the beginning, and then I didn't think about him at all. But I would like to have considered him to be in a predicament, or he's on his way, or because we know that's going to happen. So there's no point in making it a surprise, and unless it would have been a really bold move and actually not have him in it at all, and he does go home. That would have really turned the show.
That would have been cool and very fascinating.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, this is called Willow because he's got the right idea.
I'm glad you brought up Warwick Davis, because yes, that was one of the things that we just weren't really quite sure where to kind of put our finger on that. Willow in this episode was the best he's been in the entire series for me. I loved him. It was a little bit weak, him walking off, although there was a part of me that thought, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if he actually did that? That would be interesting. But of course he didn't. And then when he comes back, there's no hesitation. There's no pain from using magic. He's very, very powerful, very, very sure of himself. He's not snarky or cynical, because he's accepted his quest and he's accepted his role. I was so happy for that. And the part that made me scratch my head a little was, I wish I had a little bit of a tighter development of character where there's some clear, internal conflicts that he has, but we know what he's trying to do and who he's trying to be. So I was so happy for that, because I was very much indifferent to, and I didn't want to be, like you said, Neil, I didn't want to be indifferent to. Well, it's called Willow, but now I think you could call it something very, very differently. The magic sequence at the end, I definitely want to talk about. The visuals, again, stunning. I found myself almost holding my breath a couple times. So the peril was real. Like, I felt like the cost was authentic.
I think relative to that, but the part that is the most important to me and kind of the things that I believe in and moving it forward is the relationship between Kit and Jade, and that queer representation that was able to
was terrific,
evolve and nurture without being a distraction.
Yes, or like some sort of a titillating thing, but an authentic part of real emotions and real desire and
it was love. It was overcoming things together. It was, hey, how do we work this out? Like, oh, I trusted you and you were taking it easy on me. Are you taking it easy on me now? They worked through so many things. And I felt that was one of the best character arcs of their work together through everything. And there were times earlier in the season where it's just like, oh, God, they're hammering on this too much. But I think they stumbled out of the gate with it, but then they landed it in a fantastic place. Other than wishing that Jade, Erin Kellyman, had a little bit more of a role at the end.
Right.
Well, she was her protector, and she stopped being the protector as soon as Kit had put the armor on. You know, she was being protected. So it's an interesting little role reversal. When just getting back to Allura, when you were talking about the way she was moving, so I felt like it was she's come into her own body, and she's you know, she's become what she wanted to be, and she's loving herself, and that's generating the power, and they do talk about love being the strongest power in this, and that's what's causing this magic to happen. So yeah, that's the way I interpreted that, was that she's been lacking confidence all the way through the story.
I like that. See, you're much smarter than me. That's good. I like that.
Only once in a while, though. Only once in a while, and I milk it. But yeah, that to me, that's how I felt for that, and so I didn't have that much bother with it. You know, I've been nitpicky about stuff, but it was beautifully done, and it was a really good battle at the end. I did enjoy that, and the style that they used for the magic was really nice. That really nice. We talked about that last time, didn't we? But the jaggedness of the arcs, it wasn't that straight plume that you get with, you know, Shang-Chi and Harry Potter and stuff. You know, it wasn't just two plumes whacking into each other, and it was really kind of, they're dancing around each other, which was a beautiful visual. So I did appreciate that a lot.
So let's go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the music again.
Sure.
So where I thought,
are you talking about the ending music or the orchestral stuff?
I like the orchestral stuff.
The orchestral stuff is beautiful. Absolutely.
And I thought that worked so well throughout. And I'm a huge fan of seeing pop culture music show up in things, and it never landed with me. When they did the I'm on Fire by Springsteen, that's the last song I'm thinking about when they're in some other dimension starting to try to get the marriage together to serve the worm or whatever is happening there. So that one was just.
What about your money for nothing and your checks for free?
Well, and this is where I want to go. They didn't use all the lyrics from the song, but any kid who listened to this and is just like, oh, what song is that? That's awesome. So, I mean, this is MTV generation. This is starting it. And it is an all-time classic.
Yes.
But there are some really offensive lyrics in the original song. And as on one side, you're raising awareness and, you know, acceptance of, you know, queerness, gay, LGBTQ, everything like that. And then you're using this song at the end so that kids are going to listen to that and have this lyric at the beginning. It blew my mind in the worst way possible to see that. And I felt that was one of the most irresponsible things I imagine Disney has ever done. In my mind, I definitely don't know all of Disney as well as you do, Dan, but it is one of those things where I'm just like, do they understand how many people are going to go listen to this on someone's vinyl, on Spotify, on something like that? And they're going to hear a line in there and just be like, oh, okay, I didn't think you should be able to say this stuff.
And do that, were they familiar with the lyrics? You know, there's a certain style of dance competition where you don't dance to the music, you dance to the lyrics, right? But this is the opposite of that. I feel like for many of these songs, besides maybe a brief part of Inner Sandman or that really quick Beach Boys thing, the lyrics sort of fit, but nothing about Money for Nothing works at all. I mean, it's some great guitar, but there's a lot of amazing guitar in the history of rock and roll, or come up with something original. I don't say it to be flippant, but all the money they must have paid for royalties for those songs, couldn't they use that differently?
Yeah.
Because as much as I dig that song, these are the things, this is why it keeps frustrating me. There was so much payoff in this episode, so many narrative things and character things that were so awesome that I absolutely loved, which is why my word was relieved, because it filled my coffer of what I was hoping they would do narratively. But when you make stupid ones or have the lich, or was it the lich that uses the B word?
The crone.
Yeah.
The crone. When the crone says that, like, you don't need to be vulgar or shocking to be effective, to appeal to a younger audience. I'm talking about a low hanging fruit. That's like down at your ankles, man. That made no sense. That dopey joke by Wyrm, and then using Dire Straits at the end. Like, why you work so hard to build this incredibly compelling narrative where there is real payoff, and the ending of all these epics are hard to do because there's so many things you've got to untangle and reroute. To me, those three things really distracted from that. Like, I don't need the crone to say bitch. Like, that's not funny.
Yeah,
I mean that's so sophomoric.
It's kind of trashy.
It really is. Again, we're this show and the audience who loves Willow is better than that low hanging fruit. This is not an Adam Sandler comedy. No offense. I mean, I laugh at Happy Gilmore as much as anybody, but come on, man.
But there's a time and a place.
There is, and it's not episode 8 of this to me.
And I'll agree with you. And if someone's like, "Oh, you're just an old guy," I'm fine with that. I like to respect people. I want to respect an audience. This isn't the type of show where I want to challenge the audience and push them out of their comfort zone on
out of the
components.
verisimilitude that you worked so hard to earn.
Right. Yeah, you're building off of something that was much more pure.
Don't distract. And
then I think it's funny that Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score for season 1 is currently at 60%.
Okay.
The critic score is 86%.
Really?
And that's
glad to hear that.
I went to do my work to go figure out, like, okay, what am I doing? Am I watching it wrong? Am I doing this or that? Like, should I be liking this more? So it was incredibly interesting to me to see those numbers and saying, like, oh, I'm with the audience on this one.
All right.
I did.
Sorry,
go on.
No,
I was
please.
going to say I did. I came across a review shortly after, and I can't for the life of me remember. I should have made a bookmarker. So anyway, and they talked about the fact that the music that's being used and the language that's being used is really, and actually you mentioning MTV, it does really pull everything back to the 80s, and that's possibly why they were doing it, was to try and recapture that 80s vibe of the original Willow, even though the original Willow didn't have contemporary music in it. It was played as a straight fantasy with comedic elements. And
that was only in 89, right? So just 1 year of the 80s.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's towards the end of the 80s then. But it just felt like this effort that they've done now, it had so much potential, but the way that people were speaking to each other and the needle drops just felt forced and unnecessary. It could have been, for me anyway. I mean, I know for a fact there's loads of people that love these needle drops. And I've seen a lot of people on social media saying how refreshing it is to have this kind of contemporary music, and something really turns things on its head and stuff like that. But it's horses for courses. What do you like? And so I maybe if there is a second season and I do watch it, then I'm going to go into it with a completely different mind than I have, with this first one, and maybe they'll shock me and not do the needle drops, and then I'll be all confused.
Ron Howard has already come out and said if there is a second season, he would like to at least direct one episode.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't do that. Yeah, that's.
I'm curious if he watched this season. It was like, okay, I like this and this and this, but oh boy, can we bring this back? Bring this back a little, and that's where the pacing, the cadence, the intensity, and consistency. Those were the four things that were off for me the most, and I think that's what left it jumbling the entire time. So I don't know if it needs more of a singular voice at times. I don't know if there needs to be the absolute showrunner that's doing certain elements. I don't
keep
know
all the cooks out of the kitchen,
produced.
like you alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
So I think Ruby Cruz is a breakout star in this. I think she's phenomenal as Princess Kit. She's an absolute standout for me. I thought that Ellie Bamber was excellent as Allura, and I really like what you said, Neil, about her lacking in confidence and being uncertain of her role, but then her suddenly kind of feeling comfortable in her own skin, really embracing the beautiful person that she is inside and out. That is great. Are there other standouts for you or things that really, really worked for you from this cast besides those two? Or feel free to talk about those two as well.
Well, I mean, I've all along I've been saying how much I liked Graydon, and his kind of air quotes demise was. I mean, it was fine. At first, I hated it. I was like, the heck? And then suddenly I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can deal with this. It was a big sacrifice that he did. And it's the catalyst that makes Allura, really become who she becomes. So it's kind of, it was useful in that way. I guess we're going to be talking about the post-credit scene, as well. And I'm invested in Graydon's character enough that I don't want to see him go down the dark path, but maybe this is what's going to be happening, and because he's such an interesting character. He's my favorite character out of all of them, basically, because he's got this bizarrely checkered past, and but he began the whole show as this simpering fool, and then suddenly there's a lot going on. Even and I can even forgive the magic flute, suddenly appearing. But that for me, I thought was kind of it was something that made me reevaluate my viewing of the show. Was my initial reaction, and then suddenly tempering myself and saying, "Wait a minute, okay, no, this is good. Stop being so bitter."
See, Gray, I'm glad you brought Graydon up, because Graydon is a character that I wanted to like, but he never caught on for me, because I was never sure what he was about, because I don't feel like the show really knew what he was about. And I mean, again, people much smarter than me are working on this, and God love them. I just felt like he's got this weird past, but it's not really ever addressed. And I don't think it wasn't addressed because they've got wonderful plans for parts 2 and 3. I think it's, I don't know what you said, Ross. I keep coming back to it in my brain during this conversation. Maybe what they wanted to do, they weren't able to do. I don't know that for sure, and I certainly don't want to I don't want to perpetuate that, because that is completely not confirmed by anybody who worked on it who actually would know. But I struggled with him because he's in love, he's not in love. I mean, again, these characters don't have to be Hamlet, but they do have to. There has to be something that shows me that I can follow the breadcrumbs. And again, I don't want to be snarky about it either. I love the actor. I like the idea of this character, I guess, but I'm not really sure if I really know what the idea is. And then when he died, I didn't feel as much sadness as I thought I should have, because I didn't feel like he had earned it for me as a viewer. And then when he comes back at the end, I just thought, okay, I mean, is this really, do you want to just talk about the end, or do you want to talk about Graydon? Because I got plenty to say about the end. Ross, what did Graydon work for you?
Yeah, I think he was like a lot of the characters for me. where they're just like, oh, I love this part. And then it's just like, oh, they just had this goofy line and now I don't take them seriously anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I felt that happened a lot. And I don't know if it's writing. I don't know if it's delivery. I don't know if it's direction. Just that general inconsistency that, I want to sit there and enjoy watching a show, and I love the escapism of it. So when I have to work to try to convince myself to like something,
Mm-hmm.
or remind myself that I like something, that's putting effort into something that should be effortless. And I think they caused a lot of effort in the show by not always knowing where they wanted to take something, or at least not executing it well enough on screen to let me understand quickly. I don't know. Is that a fair way to say it? Does that make sense?
As well said.
Yep.
But
What are you trying to think,
Graydon, as far as him in the end, I think that's cool. I figured he wasn't gone. And he's also shown to be very bright, very well read. He has a dark path, and dark past that has tied into him, and he's quote unquote healed, but the elves healed Frodo's wound as well, and he never recovered from it. So is that something that sticks with him through season 2 if we get it, into season 3 if we get it, kind of thing? So I think he has a little bit of Frodo to him in this.
Mm-hmm. He might. Let's talk about the finale. Let's talk about the so it's resolved because the crone is defeated, and crone is just an old Celtic word which basically means old woman or wise woman, which slowly evolved into the term witch, by the way. So that's why, hence the term crone. And she is defeated. It's a really great action sequence. There's some narrative force, and we haven't really talked about the flashbacks where the crone under the guise of her younger self, which I assume that's the same woman that was kind of trying to seduce Eric into drinking of that orange jello-y goo that you have before you have a colonoscopy. And then I thought that was cool. I thought that was effective. Kind of that concept of, like in Odysseus, in the Odyssey, being tempted by other things. Temptation's a great part of mythology. It's an important aspect, and there's some realism in that as well, because there are always things that pull on the human condition, which I think is another great example of storytelling. So I thought that was all effective. The crone is defeated, and then there's this moment where they're like, "Where's the worm?" Well, the worm's down there. The worm's really angry. Okay, well, let's just walk away. And there's a part of thinks, are you kidding? Like, is there ever going to be a better time? You defeated the worm's number one nemesis. I'm not sure what the gender of the worm is. By defeating the crone, you destroyed all these other minions. Like, why in the world are you not? And I'm not someone again who points out flaws like that, because storytellers have the reasons, but I am not convinced that there's a sound story reason why you don't go after the worm. Is it because someone is injured and you've got to get them to healing? You don't have time? No, that's not the case. Is it because you've got a deadline to go somewhere? No. Is it because you don't want to miss the kickoff of the Dallas Cowboys Tampa Bay Buccaneers game? No, that's not it. So why would you not do that? Again, that didn't take me out of it, because I already was very much happy with this episode, which we'll see soon was my grade. But I just thought, again, why is that the decision? I don't get that at all. I mean, if it's purely to set up a sequel, then that is not good storytelling. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's not. The sequel has to rise and take what has been seeded and grow from that. Not because let's make it incomplete. Yes. Yeah. Where's the learning? Where's the growing? This isn't a Seinfeld episode. That would be a lot funnier in a good way. And that's not a knock on Will. It's just because I like Seinfeld. Anyway, no soup for me. What about the finale for you two?
Well,
The
also
wrap up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as you're mentioning there, though, they're walking away not defeating the worm, but we all know that they're actually not going to go anywhere because it's been established when Eric was trying to escape. You can walk as long as you want and you'll end up back in the city.
Unless that's undone because they defeated the crone. That's how I kind of
that's undone now? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, then I'll take that one back. No, the only other thing that I wanted to mention that I was enjoying was the vision aspect of it, where Alora and Kit were, again, you were talking about temptation, and Alora was tempted with this promise of the life that she'd always wanted, and Kit was tempted with this, the approval of her mother and everything that was, tied up with that. However, as much as I was getting into it, it was the dialogue again just yanked me straight back out again. It was just painful. The stuff that Alora was saying to Eric, and when we're coming in for the kiss and stuff, and it just didn't sound right to me, and I was just it's been this constant case of being frustrated by I'm really enjoying this. No, I'm not. Damn. I guess try again. So that was one issue for me, but I thought that was a really lovely scene. It was beautifully shot. It looked amazing. Everything was really, really put together well. Apart from the contemporary music, the other music was really good as well in that. So
did it frustrate you that they weren't going to go after the worm at the end? I mean, that'd be like saying,
sorry,
I defeated Darth Vader. Let's just leave the Emperor alone. Sure.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you there. And we didn't. I mean, we kind of saw the worm, didn't we? We had that one shot where you saw those ridges where I'm not sure if that was the worm itself or whether that was the path that it had taken, or it wasn't, for me anyway, it wasn't established enough for me, but you had these great armies as well. And I'm not sure, did they all disappear as well when the crone died, or they're still there? And
I don't know that they really.
A little bit foggy for me.
Did they?
They were there when Graydon
took care of him, I think, because he was covered in sand, which I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, but when Graydon stood up and then went and with the,
there were a lot of bodies,
with the vision of Alora, when she stood up and he ascended that hill to meet her and looked out, that's where all the monsters and everything were.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, wasn't there an earlier shot though where we saw a lot of kind of armies kind of appearing? And
besides the ending, I don't. Not that I remember.
Okay, maybe I'm just getting confused.
He woke up on a lot of the dead bodies of soldiers.
Yeah,
yeah. So when
I will say
in that other realm,
there's a cool thing. There's a cool Borum thing. Like I didn't mind that we didn't get to see the big fight at the end where Borum takes out everybody, because that's kind of cool in a way, because the imagination can kind of play with that. Maybe we'll get it in flashbacks or throws of season 2 or 3. There's a really, I won't say it's obscure, but less talked about in popular culture Shakespearean play called Coriolanus. And Coriolanus is this amazing, powerful soldier and, of course, future leader. And there's a sequence at the beginning of the play where he goes into this castle or fortress, and they go out of the way to talk about how many soldiers are in there. And what Shakespeare does is he closes the door, and Coriolanus is in there, and he fights and he fights and he fights, and you hear all this noise and all this. I'm sure that the cast and crew and everybody is just making all kinds of noise. Then the door opens after a decent amount of time. Coriolanus walks out bathed in blood, and there's nothing that needs to be said other than, well, this guy's the most powerful soldier, the most powerful weapon there is. Look what he did. We don't have to see it. So I'm going to hope. So that's sort of how I took that scene. But Ross, so did the ending work for you? I mean, so Alora, we see Alora. She's got this massive army, and it's not really her. It's like a dark version of her. Her hair is cut short. And now Graydon is suddenly alive, which, again, sacrifice me. Can you imagine in Spider-Man Far From Home when Aunt May, Aunt May is like, hey, what's up? I feel, I mean, that's not certainly the emotional heft of Aunt May's death versus Graydon's is life. There's been a lightning bug and a bolt of lightning. to quote a Mark Twain euphemism. But I liked it. I didn't roll my eyes, but I thought I didn't really need that. Maybe as a post-credit sequence, okay, but I didn't need to be fed that because I liked the narrative as it was. And I will say the moment where we see the book being put on the shelf and there's two other books, I love that. I thought that was really cool. That is the piece I'm going to hold on to.
Yeah, and I think it's smart to do it that way and leave it open-ended.
Mm-hmm.
So again, whether this happens next year or whether we wait another 30 years for another round to happen again, that door's left open, so you get that opportunity. So I mean, the ending was fine for me. Like it closed it up. I was happy to support this show the whole way through. I know that everything that I love on Disney Plus, everyone else doesn't necessarily love, but I think it's all about supporting fans. And how can I support what someone else loves? How can I support that? Hoping that just kind of keeps that positive momentum going. I want Disney Plus to succeed, so they're willing to take risks on things. So I'd rather take the risk and not love it than just not get a new show at all. So all that being said, I'm okay from the big picture of things. I think just the end, the intensity once again was just absolutely missing for me. Like it was kind of like the kids on Riverdale, and they've just had a big car chase or a big gang fight or something like that. And then they catch their breath for 2 minutes and say, okay, let's go get milkshakes at the diner again. Like that's what this ending kind of turned into for me, where it's just like Alora's the only one turning around to look and being like, oh, I know something bad's back there.
And again, why not do something about it right away?
Yeah. And everyone else is just like, oh, let's get out of here.
There's no narrative reason why, because she's just learned so much and she's faced her fears. Why not just take care of it all?
Yeah, I mean, they're at the most powerful they're going to be. So this would be the most perfect time to do it.
So, but also maybe they're aware that, we don't have, we're beat down right now. We need to recover. We need to get an army. We need to prepare everyone else, knowing that this Wyrm is there. And whether they know an army exists or not, again, I think it leaves a lot of questions. There's a lot of open-ended things that can be fantastic depending on how they come back, or if they come back with it, or if it's just kind of out in the ether.
And is it ambiguity, or is it just incomplete storytelling?
Yeah.
So I think we've certainly filled out our rubric to a great extent. Let's give our letter grades for the episode. Ross, let's start with you.
I will give some redemption. I'll go back. I'm going to go back into the B's and just give it a solid B. It came back. There were things that I loved about it, and there were things where I was just, times where I probably looked at my phone more than I typically would during a show that I really like. So, I saw it through. I think that's one of the biggest things I can do, and that this episode made it easier to see it through the final episode.
Okay. So you said B?
B.
Okay. Neil.
Yep, I'm going with a B-. And that's just marginally better than last week's episode, which is kind of, surprising, but it's still, I enjoyed it, but there's still the frustrations creep in, and I just can't enjoy it enough to go any higher than that. And I would love to, but yes, anyway, there we go.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Again, I think our honesty, no one is enjoying, of the three of us, no one is enjoying that things don't work. Like, we want it to work desperately, but we can only be, intellectually honest and be critical thinkers. I mean, that's all we know. And that's a very positive thing. There are 3 episodes in this series that were my favorite. The Gales, which is the first one, Wildwood, which is the 5th one, and then this episode. The last week, I gave it an F. This one I'm giving an A-.
Very good.
And it's not because I'm trying to balance it out. Believe me, if you earn a bad grade, you're getting a bad grade. That's part of the pedagogical gig of being an educator. But the things that didn't work for me were significantly inferior and below the things that did work for me. Overall, even with the silliness and the random use of a mild obscenity, I thought the narrative overall was strong. I thought there was some resolution of characters that are a little bit more complex, like Kit and Allura. Everyone else was reduced to a minor character, or just almost like just nice, not window dressing, but just very, very one-dimensional. But that didn't take away from the visuals, the orchestral score, the performances, and a nice resolution to a sort of a convoluted structural plot. So I give this one an A-. As we wrap up, what about a letter grade for the entire first season of Willow? I can start.
I'll go first.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
So I would go. I'm going to go with a C+ for the whole season. That it's just middling kind of. There was parts that I did enjoy, parts that I loathed, and I think that's as fair as I can be.
I love it. Do you prefer this or the movie?
You know what? Actually, I think I prefer this to the movie.
Okay.
Strangely, yeah, but yeah, that's how I feel.
Fair enough. Appreciate that, Ross. Great for the overall season.
So what I'm going to say here, I had a grad school professor at University of Baltimore say, "You're a gifted writer, and you're a lazy writer," and that has never left me since she said it.
Oof.
And I put a lot more, and she's fantastic. Like, we're friends to this day. She was pushing me. She's like, "You can do better." She's like, you lap people just by doing your regular work sometimes, where if you put the extra effort into it, you could blow people away. That being said, I felt at that moment that I was being a C student. And I think that woke me up a little bit. I think this is a C. From, there are definitely some positives. There are moments that shine where it's just like, okay, this is good enough that this should be much better in this area. This area and this area were so good that this should be much better. We know you can do it. It's are you willing to put in the work to get up to the next level?
Your professor that's excellent. That's excellent advice. And I think it's apt. I'm going to give it a C as well. There were things that I loved. There were things that I adored. There were things I was very much looking forward to. And then by the time we got to the end, the characters I cared about, I was satisfied with their conclusions because they had earned that through their development and through the performances and through their arcs. But there were a lot of things that were tonally inconsistent, or maybe they were exactly consistent and I just didn't like it and I just couldn't embrace it because it was consistently inconsistent, as I think I said earlier on in the season when we were reviewing this. It was fun. I want to see Lucasfilm continue to branch out because I think there are a lot of great characters that we've met in different franchises that we certainly love, but I think there's so much more that can be done. Could I do a better job? No, absolutely not. And I'm certainly not saying that. I don't think any of us are. But we know what we like, and we know what doesn't work for us. And I think that's the best that you can hope for and still trust us and take us at our word. When we say we like something, we mean it. When you say we don't, that as well. And I feel like that honesty is what I wanted from some of the other characters on the show, and I didn't always get that. But that's okay. I know that I have really appreciated processing with everyone who joined me to discuss the first season of Willow, especially the two of you who joined me for the most of the Willow conversation. Gentlemen, always appreciate your insights, your honesty, and your senses of humor. Ross, please let everybody know where they can find you and all of your great work. And thank you again for joining me to discuss Willow. Thanks for watching it multiple times, by the way.
Yeah. No, that definitely put it in there and lets me add up those Disney Plus numbers. So hopefully some rewards points come through or something like that. But you can find me at Ross Hollebon on Twitter, at Popstar Indie on Instagram. writing for Fantha Tracks, although I've been slacking there a little bit. And then just like mentioned previously, still continuing to crank out the pre-production for what will be my music podcast.
Looking forward to that. I was thinking about that today. Neil, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. I'm grateful for the length of time we've been friends, and then we've been able to talk a lot more, ironically, because of Willow, but we'll certainly have you back to talk some Star Wars in the near future. Please let everybody know where they can chat with you.
Please, yes. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Nobby1138. You can find, actually, if you're interested in finding out if I know what I'm talking about when it comes to story, I publish under the banner April Moon Books, and I've published a dozen books so far. This is not all of my work; it's other authors that I publish, but I also write myself. So if you go on Amazon and look for Neil Baker, you'll find books that I'm in. They're all short stories, but you can get an idea of what kind of thing I'm into, and you can make a decision whether I'm talking nonsense or not.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.